What do you call it when the man you married watches his own mother mock you for living off his money, in a house you own, in a car you paid for, and says nothing at all? That's exactly what happened at my father-in-law's retirement party, in front of 30 relatives and my own son. Patricia laughed and told everyone I'd never earned $1 in my life, that Daniel gave me everything. The house, the Porsche, all of it. None of that was true. That house came from my grandmother. That car was titled in my name alone. And when I corrected her, calmly, in front of our son, I wasn't looking at Patricia anymore. I was looking at my husband, waiting for him to say one word in my defense. Instead, he told me to apologize to his mother. I took my son and left that party without raising my voice. But by the next morning, my lawyer was already on the phone with Daniel, and what came out over the following weeks wasn't just about a house and a car anymore. It was about exactly how many lies my husband had been telling his own family for years, just to feel like enough. Here's where I need to slow down and tell you how we got to that ballroom in the first place. The ballroom smelled like warm champagne and the carpet cleaner they'd used that afternoon. I remember that first before anything else. The Hartwell Community Center on Senerio Road, a rented hall with gold folding chairs and a banner that read Happy Retirement. George, 32 years of service. I counted the tables while Daniel parked. 9 tables, 8 seats each. Somewhere close to 30 relatives and George's old colleagues from the county engineering office, all of them holding little plastic flutes. I had spent the morning finishing a plate of pressed larkspur for a field guide, my brush so fine it held maybe 4 hairs. I mention this because by 6 o'clock that evening, I would hear my work described 3 separate times as your little flower doodles. The first time came from Patricia. She met us at the door in a navy dress, kissed Noah on the top of his head, and looked at me the way you look at a coat you're deciding whether to keep.
Claire,
Don't you look rested? She said it to her sister-in-law, not to me. That's the nice thing about not really working. You always look rested. I smiled. I'd had 11 years of practice, smiling at Patricia. I said the shrimp looked wonderful and went to find Noah a chair. Here is the thing nobody in that room knew, the thing I had let them not know for years. The house Daniel and I lived in on Bellwood Court, the 4-bedroom with the wraparound porch and the maple my grandmother planted, was mine, not ours.
Mine.
My grandmother Eleanor left it to me when she died, deeded in my name alone. The Porsche I'd driven to the party, a 1987 911 the color of dark wine, was hers too, titled to Claire Eleanor Doss, no one else. Eleanor had been very specific about both in her kitchen, the year before she passed, holding my hand across the oilcloth. You keep your own name on your own roof, she told me. A man who loves you won't mind. And a man who minds was never going to love you right. I had nodded and thought it was old-fashioned. I had kept quiet about it around the Doss family for 11 years because keeping quiet kept the peace, and I thought peace was the same thing as being loved. The dinner ran long. George gave a short speech about culverts and storm drains that made the engineers laugh, and the rest of us clap politely. He caught my eye once from the front and gave me a small nod, the private kind, and I nodded back. Then the microphone, which should have gone back in its stand, ended up in Patricia's hand. I just want to say a few things about family, she said. I felt Daniel shift in the chair beside me. He was looking at his water glass. Patricia talked about her sons. She talked about Marcus first, Daniel's older brother, the one in Denver with the medical device money, and the lake house for a good 2 minutes. Then she got to Daniel. And my Daniel, she said. He works so hard. He really does. Some men, they marry a woman and she brings something to the table. A soft laugh moved around the room. And some men just carry the whole table themselves. She let that land. Someone at the back table said, "Oh, Pat, the way you scold a friend you agree with." "I'm only teasing," she said, which is what she always said. But it's true. That beautiful house, that fancy little sports car Claire likes to drive around town, Daniel gave her all of it. Every bit. Some women paint flowers. Another laugh, bigger now. And some men pay for the paint. Across the table, Megan lifted her glass toward her mother and mouthed something I didn't catch.
The room laughed.
30 people, gold chairs, warm champagne. I felt the sound of it in the soles of my feet. I want to be honest about what I did in that moment, because it wasn't brave. I picked up my napkin, folded it in half, and folded it again. I looked at the little press crease. I thought about the deed in the fireproof box in my closet, the title in the same box, my grandmother's handwriting on the manila folder. I thought, I could stand up right now and end this in one sentence. I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I did what I always did. I turned to my husband, because in 11 years of Patricia's little jokes, there had been exactly 2 times he'd said, lightly, "Mom, come on." 2 times. I wasn't asking for a speech. I was asking for 4 words. Mom, that's not true. I looked at Daniel. He had his phone out under the edge of the table, thumb moving. When the laughter reached its peak, he lifted his water glass an inch, like a man toasting something, and set it back down. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at his mother. He looked at the tablecloth, and there was something almost peaceful on his face, the face of a man who has decided that the easiest thing is to let a thing happen to his wife. That was the moment I understood he wasn't going to stand up. Not because he'd forgotten to, because he had chosen not to, the way you choose to let a phone ring. And in the small silence after the laughter, my son's voice came up clear and high from the chair beside me, the way children speak when they think they're helping. He tugged Daniel's sleeve. "Dad," Noah said, "why did Grandma say the car is yours?" I set my glass down on the folding table before I answered him. The plastic tablecloth had gone soft under all the sweating water pitchers, and the ice in my cup had shrunk to 2 thin slivers. "Because Grandma doesn't have all the facts, sweetheart," I told Noah. I kept my voice level. I even smiled. Then I straightened up, because a lie repeated in a room full of people stops being a joke and starts being a record. Patricia was standing near the dessert table with her sister and 2 of George's former colleagues, one of them a woman named Dolores who had known me for 6 years.
You walked over.
I did not raise my voice. "Patricia," I said, "I want to clear something up, since it keeps coming up tonight. The house on Bellwood Court is mine. So is the Porsche. I inherited both from my grandmother, Eleanor. They're my name. Only my name." For a second, nobody spoke. A chair scraped somewhere behind us on the tile floor, that long, dragging sound. Dolores looked at me, then at Patricia, waiting. I turned toward Daniel. This was the part where he says, "She's right, Mom." That's all it needed. For words. He was looking at the carpet like it owed him money. Patricia laughed, but it came out thin. "Oh, Claire. We don't need to make a scene." "I'm not making a scene," I said. "I'm correcting one." Daniel crossed the room fast. He put his hand on my elbow, not hard, but with intent, the way you'd steer a shopping cart with a bad wheel. "Can I talk to you?" "Outside." The hallway off the Hartwell Community Center's main room smelled like floor wax and old coffee. A vending machine hummed against the wall, its light flickering on a row of pretzels nobody would ever buy. He waited until the door swung shut.
"What are you doing?" he said.
It wasn't a question. Telling the truth. You should try it. My father just retired. 32 years. This is his night, and you're up there arguing about deeds. He pressed his fingers to the bridge of his nose. Just go say you overreacted.
Tell my mother you're sorry.
In front of everyone. I looked at him for a long moment. Somewhere in that hallway, I was still hoping I'd misheard.
"Sorry for what?" I said.
For owning my own house? For embarrassing her. His jaw worked. "Claire, I mean it. You go back in there and you apologize, or don't bother coming home tonight. Don't bother coming home." He said it like the address on Bellwood Court had his name carved into the front step. Like the 4 bedrooms, the walnut banister my grandmother had run her hand down for 40 years, the little studio where I painted, were his to lock me out of. I felt the words settle somewhere under my ribs, and I made myself remember them exactly. I would need them later. I didn't argue. That surprised him, I think. I've learned that people expect you to fight, and when you go quiet they mistake it for surrender. "Okay," I said. He blinked. "Okay. Okay," I said again, and I walked past him. I did not go apologize. I found Noah by the cake table, holding a paper plate with a slice he hadn't touched. "Get your coat, Bug," I said. We're going home. But the cake. Bring it. I found George on the way out. He was near the coat rack, tie loosened, looking older than 68 under those fluorescent lights. He touched my shoulder. You leaving already? It's a school night, I said, which was true, and also not the reason. He held my eyes a beat longer than the answer deserved. Then, quiet enough that no one else could hear, he said, You didn't say anything that wasn't true, Claire. His thumb pressed my shoulder once, like a man bracing a thing he isn't ready to name. I filed that away. There was something in his face I'd come back to later, though I didn't know it yet. Outside, the parking lot was cold and half empty. My breath fogged. I unlocked the Porsche, the 1987 911, wine red, the paint gone soft and deep with age the way old paint does. My grandmother bought it new the year I was born. She used to say a woman should always own one thing that's fast and entirely her own. Noah climbed into the back with his cake on his lap. The engine turned over on the second try, that flat rasp it makes in the cold, and I let it warm a minute before I pulled out. My hands were steady on the wheel. That part one remember clearly, because I kept checking. We got on the highway toward Bellwood Court. The heater took its time. I watched Daniel's name light up my phone once, twice, then go dark in the cup holder, and I didn't reach for it. I thought I understood the whole shape of the night by then. His mother's cruelty, his cowardice, the 4 words he wouldn't say. I thought the worst thing that had happened was the hallway. Then, about a mile from our exit, Noah's voice came from the back seat, small and matter-of-fact, the way kids drop the heaviest things. Mom, he said, the other day I heard Dad tell Uncle Marcus he bought the house for you. Why would he say that? The morning came in gray through the kitchen window, and I was already awake, standing at the counter with a mug I hadn't touched. Noah's question from the night before was still folded up somewhere in my chest. I hadn't slept. I'd listened to the house instead. The tick of the water heater, the hum of the refrigerator, the small settling sounds of a place I had lived in for 11 years. At 9:00 for the phone lit up on the counter. Daniel. A text, no greeting. You embarrass my mother in front of everyone. When you've thought about your attitude, we can talk. Not before. I read it twice. Then I set the phone face down and finished the coffee I no longer wanted. Noah was still asleep upstairs. I could hear the ceiling fan in his room, the one that rattled on the low setting. There's a particular quiet that settles over a woman who has spent years keeping the peace and has just discovered the peace was never hers to keep. I didn't cry. I picked the phone back up, scrolled past my sister's name, past the pediatrician, and found a number I hadn't dialed in a long time. Robin Vale answered on the 3rd ring. Claire Bellwood, she said, and the warmth in her voice nearly undid me. It has been, what, for years? 5. I steadied my hand against the counter. Robin, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer like a lawyer, not like the girl who used to steal my highlighters. A pause. Then the shift in her tone, professional, careful. Go ahead. I told her about the house on Bellwood Court. The 4 bedrooms. The deed my grandmother Eleanor had signed over before she died. My name, and only my name on the paper. I told her about the Porsche, the 1987 911, wine red, the one my grandmother had left me in the will along with a note I still had folded in a drawer. And then I told her what Patricia had said at the retirement party, and what Daniel had not said, and what he had said in the hallway instead. Robin was quiet for a moment. I heard a pen click. Send me the deed and the title, she said. Scan them today. But Claire, from what you're describing, this isn't complicated. Inherited property, titled solely in your name, kept separate. He has no interest in either. Not the house, not the car. None. I sat down on the stool. My legs simply decided it for me. Say that again. He has no claim to any of it. It's yours. It was always yours. For 11 years I had let a story stand because correcting it felt unkind. And here was Robin, a friend from a lecture hall 2 decades gone, telling me in a flat, calm voice that the truth had been a document the whole time.
Filed.
Notarized. Sitting in a drawer under a note in my grandmother's slanted handwriting. I had been carrying a weight that turned out to be a key. I want to send him something, I said. In writing. Something that makes all of this clear. The finances.
Noah.
That's the right instinct, Robin said. I'll draft a letter. Clarifies the separate property and proposes a temporary arrangement for visitation and custody while things settle. Nothing aggressive. Just facts on paper. Facts are hard to argue with once they're on paper. She asked me to pull our joint account statements before we talked again. The household account. The one Daniel and I had shared for groceries and utilities since before Noah was born. I want a full picture, she said. If we're going to draw lines, I want to know where every line already is. After we hung up, I made myself another coffee I wouldn't drink and opened the laptop at the kitchen table. The house was still. Noah's fan still turned overhead somewhere. I logged into the joint account, the login I used maybe twice a month to check the electric bill. The balance loaded first. Lower than I expected. I frowned and told myself I'd been buying a lot of framing supplies for the Orchid Commission. Then I opened the transaction history and started scrolling. Groceries. The water bill. Noah's soccer registration, $40, back in March. The auto pay for the internet. Ordinary lines. All of them. The small arithmetic of a marriage. And then, threaded between the ordinary ones, something that was not ordinary. A transfer I didn't recognize. Then another, 3 weeks earlier. Then another before that. I stopped scrolling. I sat very still and did the thing I do when a drawing has gone wrong and I can't yet see how. I went back to the beginning and looked at every mark. I opened a fresh document and started typing the numbers in, one at a time, the way my grandmother taught me to balance a checkbook by hand. 600 here, 800 there, 1,000. Then I added them. The total appeared at the bottom of the screen and I read it and then I read it again because a number cannot mean what that number meant. Almost $12,000 had left the account. And no one had ever told me. The statement was still open on my laptop, but I stopped scrolling. I opened a new tab instead and logged in fresh because part of me needed to believe the number was a glitch. It wasn't. I hit print. The old machine in the corner of my studio woke up with a groan, and page after page slid into the tray, still warm. I laid them out on the floor between the drafting table and the window, the way I lay out reference sketches when I'm trying to see a whole plant at once, root to bloom.
March.
A transfer of 400 and something, then another. April, 2 more. They were small. That was the trick of it. Nothing over a couple thousand. Nothing that would make you stop. Spread across 6 months. Each one looked like a grocery run or a plumber. I took a pencil and circled the ones going to the same place. Then I connected them with a line, the way I'd trace a stem. They all led to 2 names. Patricia.
George.
I counted twice. The total came to just under $12,000. I sat back on my heels. Outside, a neighbor's sprinkler ticked on and started its slow sweep across the grass. I listened to it for a while. Then I called the bank. The hold music was a tinny loop of something meant to be soothing. When a woman finally picked up, her voice had that flat kindness they train into people who deliver bad news for a living. I read her the transaction dates. I asked who had authorized them. I can see these were initiated online, she said. There was a pause, keys clicking. From a device registered to the account. The login was under Daniel. You're sure? The name on the session is Daniel, ma'am. Every one of them. I thanked her. I actually thanked her, like she'd done me a favor. Then I set the phone face down on the hardwood and looked at the pages spread around me like a map of somewhere I used to live. Here's what I kept thinking about. In March, Noah's soccer registration came due, $40, and Daniel had frowned at the kitchen table and said maybe we should hold off a season. Money was tight. We should be careful.
$40.
He'd said be careful to me while 4,000 quietly walked out the door to his mother. I didn't cry. I want to be honest about that because for years I'd have expected myself to. Instead, I got very organized. I labeled each sheet with a sticky note. I wrote the dates in order. My hands were steady, which surprised me more than anything else that morning. That's when Noah came in. He was still in his pajama top, holding something against his chest with both arms the way he carries the cat. Mom, he said, I found a treasure. Yeah? What did you find, bud? It was in Dad's drawer. The stuck one. He'd been rummaging for a phone charger, he said, in the desk in the spare room, the drawer that never opened all the way. He held it out. A manila envelope, soft at the corners, the flap worn pale from being opened and closed too many times. Can I see it? He nodded and climbed onto the window seat to watch a squirrel. Inside was a single printed email, Daniel's address at the top. Below it, 2 names in the recipient line, his parents. The date was from the fall, months before George's retirement party. I read it standing up. It was warm. That was the strange part. It was affectionate in a way Daniel rarely managed with me anymore. He told them how much he'd been thinking about their future, about how the stairs at their place were getting harder for his father's knee. And then, in the middle, plainly, like a thing already decided, next year we'll have you move in with us. There's more than enough room. The kids' wing never gets used anyway. The kids' wing. 4 bedrooms on Bellwood Court. My grandmother's house. Eleanor's house, that she left to me, that I signed for a loan in a lawyer's office 3 years after the funeral while Daniel waited in the car. He'd given it away in an email I was never meant to read. I sat down on the floor again, slowly, the envelope in my lap. Noah was narrating the squirrel's progress across the fence. The sprinkler ticked. Somewhere in the house the refrigerator hummed and shut off. I read the email a second time, all the way down, and that's where I found the last line. He'd added it almost as an afterthought, below his name, like he was reassuring himself more than them. Don't worry about Claire. She'll understand. She always goes along with things. I read that one line 3 times. I'd spent 11 years going along, staying quiet at the table when Patricia sharpened her jokes, signing where the lawyer pointed and never mentioning it, so no one would feel small. I had thought that was love. I had thought that was keeping the peace. I set the paper down on the floorboards, careful, like it might mark the wood. And for the first time since the party, nothing in my chest hurt. It had just gone quiet and clear. The phone rang at 4:03 that afternoon, and the screen said George. I let it ring twice. George never called me. In 11 years, the man had sent me exactly 2 text messages, both about football pickup times for Noah. I set down the mug I was washing and dried my hand on my jeans before I answered. Claire. His voice came out thin, like he'd rehearsed the word and then forgotten what followed it. Somewhere behind him a dishwasher hummed. You have a minute?
Ido.
There was a long breath on his end. I could hear him settling into a chair, the small grunt he made, the one Noah imitated at dinner sometimes. I want to say something, and I'd appreciate you letting me get it all out before you decide what you think of me.
He paused.
What Patricia did at the party. The jokes. I heard them same as everybody. And I laughed at the first one. God help me, because I didn't understand it was cruelty yet. By the third one I did. And I sat there, and I ate my chicken, and I said nothing. A pause. That was wrong.
I'm sorry.
I stood very still by the sink. The water was still running. I turned it off.
Thank you, I said.
That's not the whole reason I called. Something rustled, paper, maybe, or him rubbing his face. Claire, I need to ask you a plain question, and I need a plain answer. The house on Bellwood.
The car.
Daniel bought those. He's told us for years he carried all of it. Stretched himself thin buying you that place after your mother's side left you nothing. He hesitated. That's what he told us. That's what I believed. Patricia believed it harder. My grandmother's face came to me then, Eleanor at her kitchen table, sliding a folder across the wood, saying keep your name on your things. Girl, a house in your name is a door only you can lock. I hadn't thought of it in years. George, I said. My grandmother Eleanor left me that house. 4 bedrooms, Bellwood Court. It's deeded to me alone. She also left me the Porsche, the 1987, the burgundy one. That's a registration in my name and only my name. Daniel has never owned a square inch of either. The silence on the line went on so long, I thought the call had dropped. Say that again, he finally said. Not angry. Winded. I said it again slower. He told us he mortgaged himself to the neck for that house. His voice cracked on the word house. Patricia bragged about it. To her sister. To Dolores next door. My son bought his wife a Porsche. That's what she said at the club. And you're telling me? I'm telling you it came from my grandmother. Every bit of it. I heard him stand up. The chair scraped. When he spoke again, he was walking, and his breathing had changed. There's more, he said, and stopped himself. I don't know if I should, there's money. My stomach dropped, though I already knew. I let him say it. Daniel's been sending us money. For months. Little amounts, a few hundred, sometimes more. Never quite 2,000 at a time. He said it was extra, said business was good, said take it, Dad, I want to help. Patricia let him. She thought her son had made it. He drew a breath. I never questioned where a middle manager finds spare thousands to hand his parents. I never asked. I let it feel good. It's around $12,000, George. My own voice surprised me, how level it stayed. It came out of a joint account. Mine and his. I never agreed to a cent of it. Something fell on his end. A cup, maybe, set down too hard. That's not his to give, George said. And there it was, not grief for me, not yet, but the thing under it. The old engineer who'd spent 32 years signing his name to load calculations, who couldn't stand a number that didn't reconcile. His pride had a spine, and the spine had just gone rigid. I will not keep money my son stole from your account to make himself look like a big man. I won't. Patricia can fight me on it. I appreciate that. I want a family meeting, he said, and it wasn't a question. All of us. Your living room, if you'll have us. I want Daniel to sit down in that house, your house, and I want to hear what he says with his own mouth. All right. He was quiet a moment. Then his voice dropped, low and careful, close to the phone, and the dishwasher behind him had gone silent. So, I heard every word.
Claire.
Don't tell Daniel I called. I need to hear him lie to me one more time, myself, to my face, so I know for certain. A slow breath. So, there's no room left for me to make excuses for him.
Can you give me that?
Yes, I said. The line went dead. I stood in the kitchen with the phone warm against my ear, listening to nothing. The first call came from my cousin-in-law Dolores at 7 that evening. I almost didn't pick up. When I did, she skipped hello. Claire, I have to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. I set my tea down on the counter. Okay. Is it true you've been seeing someone? Because Daniel is beside himself. He said you've been coming home late, that you've got a lawyer, that you're trying to put George and Patricia out on the street after everything they've done. I watched the steam curl off the mug and disappear. None of that is true, Dolores. He said you'd say that. Her voice softened into something worse than anger. Pity. He's really hurting, honey. A man doesn't cry like that over nothing. I thanked her for calling and hung up. I stood there a while. Then I opened my phone and saw 4 missed calls I hadn't heard ring. 2 from numbers I didn't recognize. 1 from Megan. I didn't listen to Megan's voicemail until the next morning. I wish I had waited longer. So this is who you are, her recording said, brisk, almost cheerful. My brother gives you a house, a car, a whole life, and the second things get hard you lawyer up and cry victim. Everybody sees it, Claire. Everybody. Mom already knows what you are. There it was. The house he gave you. The car he gave you. He'd been telling the story so long that even the people betraying me believed the wrong half of it. I called Robin at 8:40. She answered on the second ring, and I could hear her stirring something in a cup. He got ahead of us, I said.
Tell me.
I told her about Dolores, about the affair he'd invented out of thin air, about Megan's voicemail, about how by now the family had a version of events with a beginning, a middle, and a villain, and the villain had my name. Robin was quiet for a moment. Send me the voicemail. Don't respond to any of them. Not one text. Robin, I have the deed. I have the registration. I have 6 months of statements with his name on every transfer. How is he winning a conversation I can prove he's lying in? Because nobody in that family has seen your paper, she said. They've heard his voice. And right now his voice is louder than your evidence because he got to them first, crying. I opened my laptop and pulled up the statements anyway. I'd printed them, highlighted them, arranged them by date like a woman who thought arithmetic was a shield. The largest single transfer was just under $2,000. 11 of them across 6 months. Nearly 12,000, gone from an account with both our names on it. That was the sentence that stopped me. Both our names. Robin, I said. The 12,000. If I take that to anyone, the family, or further, I show them the transfers were his. You show them the transfers came from a joint account, she said. His money and yours, legally. He'll say he moved his own money to his parents, which a husband is allowed to do. And then he'll say his wife is going through his private banking to build a case against his family. Which is exactly the story he's already selling. You hand him the ending he wants. I closed my eyes. Outside, a lawnmower started up 2 houses down. That flat drone that means someone's Saturday is ordinary. So the statements are worthless, I said. Not worthless.
But they don't prove theft.
They prove access. If you go loud with them now, you don't look like a woman who was robbed. You look like a woman taking revenge on her husband's parents. And Claire, that's the picture Patricia is already painting. I picked up one of the printed pages and held it to the window light, the way you check a bill for a watermark. There was nothing hidden in it. It was just true, and true wasn't enough. I thought if I could show them the numbers, I said, and stopped. I know, Robin said gently. Everybody thinks that. The numbers don't feel anything. Patricia does. And Patricia has decided who you are. That was when I understood I had misjudged all of it. I had thought Daniel would fold the moment the truth arrived on nice thick letterhead. But Daniel didn't fear the truth. He feared being seen without the story he'd built around himself. And a letter from a lawyer wasn't a mirror. It was just another thing he could describe to his mother as an attack. Noah came into the kitchen in his socks and asked if we were still doing pancakes.
I said yes.
I made them. I flipped each one and thought about a man who'd spent so many years pretending to be the one who paid for everything that he'd rather burn the family down than admit the checkbook was mine. After Noah went to eat in the other room, I called Robin back. If I can't prove it, I said, then somebody who is there has to say it. He has to say it. In front of them. I heard her chair creak. I heard papers slide together, the specific soft sound of a folder being closed. That's exactly right, she said. And listen to me, because this is the whole thing now. The statements can't take him down, Claire. Only his own mouth can. The question is, how do we make him open it in front of his parents? I set the meeting for Thursday at 7 in my own living room because I wanted them under the roof they'd all been lying about. Robin coached me for an hour on the phone.
Don't accuse, she said. Ask.
Let the room fill the silence you leave. They came in one car. Patricia first, chin up, holding a foil dish of something she hadn't been asked to bring. George behind her, quiet, a manila folder pressed flat against his hip like he was carrying it to a construction site. Daniel last, keys still in his hand, as though he might need to leave in a hurry. Megan trailed him, phone out, thumb moving. Nobody sat until I gestured at the couch. The cushions were the ones I'd reupholstered myself, in a fern print I'd painted and had printed on linen. Patricia sat on my ferns and didn't know it. Coffee? I asked. My voice came out even. I was proud of that. Let's just get on with whatever this is, Patricia said.
So I did.
I asked everyone here because there's been a lot of talk this week, I said. I'd rather we all hear the same version once, together, than keep hearing pieces on the phone. Daniel shifted. Claire, this is a family matter, and dragging my parents. You already dragged them, I said. Flat. Not loud. You called them. You called Megan. I'm just moving the conversation into the same room. That's when George cleared his throat. We'd rehearsed nothing. He simply set the folder on his knees and looked at his son with an expression I'd never seen him aim at Daniel, the look of a man checking a measurement he already suspects is wrong. Daniel, George said, I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer it plainly, the way I raised you to. This house, the one we're sitting in. He tapped the arm of the couch. What year did you buy it? The room went very still. Somewhere in the kitchen the refrigerator hummed and clicked. Noah sat cross-legged on the stairs, half in shadow, where I'd told him not to be.
I didn't send him away.
Some part of me wanted a witness who couldn't lie. Dad. What year? George said. It was around the time Noah was born. 2016, 2017. And how much? Daniel's jaw worked. I don't see why. How much, son? I'd have to check the paperwork. That's odd, George said, and his voice was almost gentle, which was worse than anger. Because a man remembers what he spends $400,000 on. I remember every house I ever bought. I remember the closing dates. I remember the smell of the offices. 32 years of them. He opened the folder. So, let me help you check the paperwork. He laid one sheet on the coffee table. I recognized it upside down. The deed to Bellwood Court, for bedrooms, my grandmother's estate reference in the corner, my name, only my name, printed clean. Eleanor's transfer. Then a second sheet beside it. The email. The one Noah had found in the stuck drawer. The one where Daniel promised his parents they'd move in next year, into the house he called his. Then George set down the third thing, and his hand didn't shake. 11 lines. 6 months. Small amounts, none of them over about $2,000, adding up to nearly $12,000. Our joint account. Daniel's name on every transfer, Patricia's and George's account on the receiving end. Megan stopped typing. The phone went face down on her knee, and she didn't pick it up again. I didn't lie about Daniel started. You told your mother and me, George said, for years at our own dinner table, that you carried this family, that you bought Claire this house, that you gave her that car in the driveway. He didn't raise his voice once. I believed you. I bragged about you. Now I'm looking at a deed with her grandmother's name and hers. So one of these papers is lying, and paper doesn't lie, Daniel. Men do. Here is the part one keep returning to. I had imagined I would feel triumphant. I felt nothing like triumph. I felt the specific quiet of watching something you loved once come apart on your own coffee table, over the ferns you painted. Daniel put the car keys down. That's when I knew. The house isn't mine, he said. Barely audible. Louder, George said. Your mother is right here. Daniel looked at Patricia. She had gone the color of the primer under paint. The house was Claire's. Her grandmother left it to her. The Porsche too, the 87, the wine-colored one, it was Eleanor's. I never bought either. I never bought her anything like that. Then why, Patricia said, and her voice cracked on the second word, why did you tell us? Because Marcus has the lake place. Daniel's face folded. Marcus, his brother, the one nobody in this family ever stopped mentioning. Marcus has the boat and the second house and the wife who doesn't have to work, and every holiday you'd ask what I was building, what I was providing, and I couldn't sit there and say my wife owns everything we have because her grandmother loved her more than my whole family ever. He stopped. Swallowed. So I said it was mine. And then I couldn't unsay it. It just kept growing. And the money? George's finger touched the bank statement. $12,000 out of the account you share with her. Did you ask her? Silence. Did you ask your wife, George said, before you moved her money to us?
No.
A whisper. I was going to tell you both you could move in. I wanted one thing that was mine to give. One thing that looked like Marcus. I looked at the money on the table. 11 transfers. 6 months of Sunday nights when he'd sat beside me on this couch, warm, ordinary, saying goodnight, while I paid the mortgage on a house he was quietly promising to fill with his parents. So it was never true, Patricia said. She wasn't looking at Daniel now. She was looking at me, and something behind her eyes was rearranging itself, wall by wall. None of it was true. The house. The car. No, I said. It was never true. Patricia stood up so fast her knee caught the table, and the paper slid. Her hand was trembling when she pressed it flat against her chest, as if she were physically holding something in place. Wait, she said.
Wait.
So this whole party, all night, I stood up in front of everyone we know, and I called her the girl living off my son's money. Her voice climbed and thinned. I humiliated the woman who pays for the roof my son sleeps under? Patricia sat down. Not gracefully. She reached back for the arm of the wingback chair and lowered herself into it like a woman who had felt the floor shift under her. The reading lamp beside her threw a hard yellow circle across her hands, and I watched those hands open and close on nothing. Nobody spoke. The radiator under the window ticked twice. George stood up. He did not look at his wife. He looked at me, and then he did something I had not seen him do in 11 years of holidays and birthdays. He straightened his shoulders like a man reporting a fault he had signed off on. "Claire," he said, "I owe you an apology, and I'm going to give it in front of everyone, because everyone heard the other thing." "George," Patricia started.
No.
He said it quietly, and she stopped. "We took money from a joint account that was half hers. 2,000 here. 1,500 there. 11 times in 6 months. I didn't ask where it came from because it was easier not to ask." He reached into his jacket and set a folded check on the coffee table, on top of the deed with my name on it. "That's every dollar that reached our account. I counted it this afternoon, twice. 32 years I signed off on other men's numbers, and I never once let one lie on a page. I'm not going to start with hers." The check sat there. I didn't touch it. Daniel was crying now, and not the way people cry to be watched. His face had gone loose and wet and ugly, and he pressed the heel of his hand under one eye like he could push it back in. "You don't understand what it's like," he said. "Marcus buys a lake house, and everybody claps. I bring a wife to Thanksgiving he stopped, who owns more than I'll ever earn. And Mom kept asking how we could afford this place for bedrooms, the good street, and I couldn't say my wife inherited it from her grandmother. I couldn't, so I said I bought it. And then I had to keep saying it." "For 9 years," I said. "For 9 years." He looked at the deed, at Eleanor's name crossed through and mine typed under it. I started to believe it too, that I was the one holding this family up. When I sent them the money, I told myself I was being the man of the... He couldn't finish the sentence. I noticed I wasn't going to finish it for him. Here is the thing nobody warns you about a moment like this. You wait years for the truth to arrive, and you expect it to feel like winning. It doesn't. It feels like standing in a house after the water has drained out, looking at the line on the wall showing how high it got. Megan had been quiet in the corner. Now she uncrossed her arms. "This is insane," she said. So he told a story to keep the peace. Half of Marcus's stories are made up too, and nobody drags him into a living room over it. She's the one with a lawyer. She's the one turning it into Megan. George didn't raise his voice. "You were going to get the old house on Kessler when we moved into this one. That's why you're talking." She flushed. She actually flushed, and I understood, in real time, a thing I had wondered about for weeks, why she had been so loud about the affair story at the party, so eager to spread it in front of everyone. The old house was going to be hers the day Patricia and George moved into my 4 bedrooms on Bellwood Court. That was the arithmetic under all of it. She didn't answer him. She looked at her phone instead. I stood. The oak floor was cold through my socks, and I was glad of it because it kept me here in my body, in my house. "I'm going to say what happens now," I said. "Once. Then you can all go home and decide how you feel about it." The room turned to me. Patricia's eyes were red-rimmed, and she was watching me the way you watch something you've mislabeled your whole life. "Daniel, you're moving out. This week. To an apartment. Not to your mother's." I felt him flinch. "You're going to pay back every dollar of that $12,000 on a schedule Robin puts in writing, and I don't care if it takes 3 years. You're going to therapy for yourself first, and then if there's ever going to be an us for us. And everything about Noah, the pickups, the soccer, the $40 registration back in March you never asked me about, goes through a written agreement. No more surprises, out of a joint account. No more promises to your parents about my address." "Claire," Patricia said. Her voice had lost all its party polish. "I didn't know. You have to believe I didn't." "I know you didn't know," I said. "That's the part one keep turning over. For 9 years I stayed quiet at your table, so this family would stay soft and easy. I let a lie stand because the truth was uncomfortable for a man who wasn't defending me." I looked at Daniel. My silence didn't protect me. It protected you. All of you. It bought Daniel a reputation he didn't earn, and it bought your mother a story she could laugh at me with. I paid for that with my own name. The radiator ticked again. Somewhere upstairs, Noah's floorboard creaked. He was awake and pretending not to be, and I would deal with that later. George picked up his coat.
We'll go, he said.
Patricia. She rose slowly. At the door she turned, and for 1 second I thought she might reach for me. She didn't. She just said, "The house is beautiful," in a small ruined voice, as if she were seeing it for the first time, and then she went out into the dark. Megan followed without looking at anyone. That left Daniel, standing in the middle of a room that had never been his, holding nothing. He wiped his face and looked at me, and his voice came out of him like something dragged over gravel. "So that's it then," he said. "It's over?" I let the question sit. Then I picked up his father's check, folded it once, and set it in his hand instead of keeping it. "No," I said. "But trust isn't something you ask for. It's something you prove, every day for years." The truck came on a Saturday. Not a big one, a rented 16-footer that Daniel backed too far up the driveway until one tire pressed into the flower bed I'd replanted in April. He got out, looked at the crushed marigolds, and moved the truck forward again without being asked. Small thing. I noticed it anyway. He carried out boxes he'd packed himself. His grandfather's clock. 2 suitcases. The reading chair from the study, the one thing in that house he'd actually bought. I stood in the doorway, with a mug going cold in my hand, and let him work. He didn't ask for help. He didn't make it a scene. At the curb he stopped. "The unit's on Fenmore," he said. "4th floor. 1 bedroom." A pause. "There's a pull-out for Noah. I got sheets with rockets on them. He might think that's babyish now." "He's 9, I said. "Ask him." Daniel nodded like I'd handed him something. Then he pulled a folded page from his jacket and set it on the porch rail between us. The repayment thing. Robin's copy and mine. First one's already scheduled. I didn't touch it until his taillights were gone. The paper was heavier than printer stock, the kind Robin uses for things she wants to hold up in a room someday. 12,000, near enough, broken into monthly amounts with dates running out past next Christmas. At the bottom, in Daniel's handwriting, not typed, I took this without asking. I am paying it back, because it was never mine to move. He'd signed it. He'd dated it. He'd left a line for me that I did not sign because Robin told me not to sign anything that thanked him for basic decency. What I didn't expect was the second sheet, folded behind it. An intake confirmation from a counseling practice on Del Mar. Individual sessions Tuesdays. And under it, a marriage counseling slot he'd penciled in for a month out, hopeful, dependent on me, unbooked. I set that one face up on the counter and left it there for 3 days without deciding anything. The first weeks were all logistics and no eye contact. We used an app for the handoffs, a shared calendar that turned our marriage into a color-coded grid. Green for his days, gray for mine. I learned to type sentences with no adjectives in them. Noah has a dentist Thursday. He needs his blue inhaler back. There's a form for the field trip. Daniel typed back the same way, and somewhere in that flat exchange I noticed he'd stopped saying we should talk and started saying I'll be there at 6. He was always there at 6, twice early. Then came the Sunday at Dolores's. I almost didn't go, but Noah wanted his cousins, and I was not going to teach him that our family shrank every time an adult behaved badly. We ate at the long table with the leaf put in. Roast chicken, the good gravy, a folding chair for me at the end because the count never quite included me anymore. Megan waited until the plates were half cleared. She has a way of aiming a comment at the whole table while pretending it's small. "It's just sad," she said, spearing a green bean, watching a family get taken apart by one person who wanted the house all to herself. That's all I'll say. She looked right at me. Homewrecker's a strong word. I didn't say it. The room did that thing rooms do, the fork slowing, everyone suddenly interested in their water glasses. I set my hands flat on the table. In the old life, I'd have absorbed it, smiled it down, kept the peace that only ever cost me. I didn't have to. "Megan." Daniel's voice. Not loud. He put his knife down. "Stop." She laughed, uncertain. I'm defending you. You're not. He said it slow, like each word cost him, and he was paying anyway. The house was always Claire's. The car was always Claire's. I lied about that for 9 years, and I took $12,000 that wasn't mine, and I let all of you believe a story that made me look like something I'm not. He looked at his sister until she looked away. Nobody wrecked this but me. Say her name like that again, and I'll leave the table. Silence, the kind you can hear the refrigerator through. Dolores reached for the gravy that didn't need passing. Megan's mouth opened and closed. I have replayed 100 versions of Daniel going quiet, the hallway at the party, his face at the microphone. Every time he chose the room over me. This was the first time he stood in front of a room and chose the truth instead, with no lawyer watching, no leverage in it for him, nothing to gain but a sister's cold shoulder. I didn't cry. I didn't thank him. I've learned the difference between a man being decent once and a man being decent, and only time tells you what you're holding. I helped clear the plates. We left before dessert. That night I set the first repayment receipt on the kitchen table. Real paper, a real number cleared, the balance a little smaller. Noah wandered in for water in his rocket sheet pajamas from the other apartment. He looked at the receipt, then at me. Is Dad really trying, Mom? I looked at the paper a long moment, then at him. We'll let time answer that, baby. The first month, I kept a paper calendar on the fridge because I didn't trust myself to believe an app. Every Tuesday and every other Saturday, I made a small pencil mark when Daniel arrived to pick up Noah. Not one late. In March, when the soccer registration came due, he Venmo'd me the $40 before I could ask, with a note that just said, Noah's cleats are a half size up now. FYI. No apology attached. No performance. Just a fact a father would know. I watched for the trick. There's always a trick. Robin found none. In April, she sat across from me at my kitchen table, spreading the post-nuptial documents out like she was dealing cards. Bellwood Court for bedrooms, your name, she said. The 911, the 87, wine-colored, your name. Separate property, clean, notarized. Nobody can ever tell you a story about this house again. She capped her pen. You could have had this 11 years ago, you know. I know, I said. I liked the quiet more than the truth.
She didn't argue.
She just slid the last page toward me and pointed where to sign.
I signed.
All of it. My hand didn't shake, which surprised me more than anything. The money finished coming back in June. Daniel had committed to it in writing, the full $12,000 in installments, every one landing on the first. The final transfer arrived at 6:11 in the morning, and I sat with my coffee and watched the balance settle, and I felt nothing dramatic. Just a small click, like a door latch finding its frame. What I didn't expect was the letter. A real one, on paper for pages, that he handed me at a Saturday handoff in a sealed envelope. He didn't watch me open it. He knelt to tie Noah's shoe and said, read it whenever. Or don't. It named things.
The party.
The 9 years. Marcus. It didn't ask for anything. That was the part that got me. A man who had spent a decade asking me to make him look bigger, writing 4 pages that asked for nothing. I read it twice. Then I put it in the drawer, where I keep Eleanor's letters. Patricia was slower. Her first apology came in July over the phone, and it arrived wearing its old coat. You know I was only joking that night, Claire. That's just how I talk. I let the silence go long enough that she heard herself. She hung up flustered. I marked nothing on any calendar. But something was working on her from the inside, and I think it was George. He'd become a quiet man that year, a man who'd learned his own son had lied to his face for 9 years, and he did not let it rest. In September, she called again and asked, plainly, if she could come to the house. Not to a restaurant. To Bellwood Court. She came on a Wednesday. She sat on the edge of my couch, the couch she'd once implied my husband bought me, and she kept her purse in her lap like a shield. I believed him, she said. About everything. He told me he carried you. He told me you painted little flowers, and he paid for all of it. Her voice thinned. I repeated it because it made my son sound like a man I wanted him to be. And I said it to you in a room full of people. She looked at the carpet. That was mine to carry, And I put it on you. No, only joking. No, that's how I talk. I poured her tea, and we drank it, and neither of us performed forgiveness. It was the first honest hour we'd ever spent in the same room. When she stood to leave, she stopped in the doorway. George told me about the house, she said quietly. The real house. Your grandmother's. She didn't say sorry again. She didn't have to. The book contract came in October, and I want to be precise about the timing because for years I was told my work was a hobby. Marsh and Vane, a real publisher, wanted a full botanical field guide, 80 original plates, my name on the spine, an advance that made Robin whistle. The editor said on our first call, your grandmother's specimens, the ones in your portfolio. Nobody's rendered golden seal like that in 40 years. I hung up and stood in Eleanor's kitchen and let myself say it out loud once. Not a hobby. I told Patricia at Thanksgiving because George made me. She asked to see the plates. When the advance copies arrived in the spring, a real hardcover, heavy in the hand, the paper thicker than ordinary paper, I brought one to their house. She turned the pages slowly. Wild ginger. Bloodroot. The trillium Eleanor had pressed the summer before she died. Patricia's finger hovered over each one without touching, the way you'd move your hand near a candle. The room was very quiet. George stood behind her chair, one hand on her shoulder, watching her the way you watch someone read their own conscience. She closed the book and held it against her chest with both hands, and she didn't look up for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice came out cracked in the middle. She's this talented, she said. And I called her in front of 200 people. I called her what I called her. Patricia set the book on her lap and pressed her palm flat against the cover, the way you study something you're afraid to drop. Outside, the sprinklers on Bellwood Court ticked on. I watched her thumb move over the embossed title, my name, small, under the flowers I'd painted at this same kitchen table 2 winters back. I don't expect you to make room for me, she said. I just wanted to say it once without the word but at the end. That was the difference. I'd learned to listen for the but. An apology that ends in but is a negotiation. An apology that ends in a full stop is a door left open, no strings on the handle. Patricia's stopped clean. I poured her more coffee. I didn't tell her it was fine. It wasn't fine, and we both knew pretending would insult the year we'd both survived. Some things you don't smooth over. You just stop lying about the shape of them. Daniel came by that Thursday to pick up Noah for the Science Museum. He still knocks now, doesn't use his key, though I never asked him to give it back. He stood on the porch of the house that was never his, holding a folder. Last one, he said, and handed it to me. The final therapy receipt, and a copy of the last transfer. The $12,000 was closed out, every dollar of the 11 withdrawals returned, month by month, to George, who had returned it all to me. Daniel had insisted on paying it a second time, to me directly, even after his father made him whole. I know it's redundant, he'd said months ago, but I took it from you, not from the bank. I signed the receipt. I didn't smile. Trust isn't a thing you feel, it's a ledger you keep, and his was finally running black. But a year of kept appointments doesn't erase 9 years of a story he told 200 people about himself. I told him that once, plainly, in the therapist's office on Fenmore. He didn't argue. That's the part one hold on to, that he stopped needing to win the room. We're still in couples counseling. I won't tell you it's headed somewhere, because I honestly don't know, and the not knowing used to terrify me. Now it's just a fact I live beside. What I do know, we are decent parents to a 9-year-old boy who no longer asks careful questions with his eyes down. Noah asks loud, ordinary things again. Last week he asked if the Porsche was going to be his someday. It's mine, I told him. From my grandmother. When I'm old, we'll talk. He accepted that the way children accept true things without flinching. And I thought of Eleanor. Of the afternoon she pressed the title into my hand in her kitchen on Bellwood Court, the paper thicker than I expected, and told me the thing I'd folded away for 11 years to keep the peace. Keep it in your name, she said. Not because you won't love someone. Because loving someone shouldn't cost you the floor under your feet. I'd smiled and thanked her, and quietly decided she was old-fashioned. Then I spent 11 years letting a family joke that I lived off my husband standing in a 4-bedroom house I inherited, driving a wine-colored 1987 911 that was mine down to the registration in the glove box. My silence never bought peace. It just paid for someone else's comfort in installments, and I was the only one who never saw the statement. Here is what the year taught me, and it's the only thing I'd want you to carry out of this house with you. There are two kinds of apology. One is offered to repair the person you hurt. The other is offered to recover something you lost: your standing, your inheritance, your seat at the table. They can use identical words. You tell them apart by what the person does the next morning and the morning after that, when no one is watching and there's nothing to gain. Patricia showed up with a stop sentence and no ask. Daniel paid the money twice. That's not forgiveness earned by feeling sorry. That's trust rebuilt one boring, unglamorous act at a time. Forgiveness is a choice. I made it slowly on my terms. But trust is not a gift you hand over. It's a wage. It gets paid in proof, and it can be docked. The sprinklers shut off. Somewhere down the block, a garage door rolled up. I put Eleanor's title back in the fireproof box where it lives now, in my name, under my roof, and I closed the lid. If you've spent years keeping quiet to keep the peace, I want you to hear one thing before you go. A boundary isn't a wall you build to punish people. It's the floor you stand on so you can love them without disappearing.